I said the worst thing possible to my boss while standing in a parking garage, and the moment the words left my mouth, I knew my life was about to change. My name is Marcus Chin. I am 42 years old, and I work as a senior architect at Brightwell Industries, one of the biggest development companies in the region. 8 months ago, I signed divorce papers in a quiet lawyer's office while my ex-wife Jessica told me I had become invisible. She said I stopped dreaming years ago. She said I chose comfort instead of living. I did not argue with her. I did not even try. I just signed my name and walked out feeling like something inside me had already shut down long before that day. After the divorce, the office became my hiding place. I arrived before sunrise and stayed long after everyone left. My desk felt safer than my empty house. Blueprints and building codes were easier to manage than emotions. I focused on foundations and steel beams because they made sense. If something collapsed, you could calculate why. Then, 4 months ago, Claire Brightwell walked into my late-night silence and changed everything. I was alone in the conference room staring at a structural design that refused to work. No matter how many times I adjusted the load points, it failed. My head felt heavy and tired. That was when she walked in carrying 2 bottles of water. She was 29 years old, vice president of development, and the daughter of the man who built this company from nothing. She had long auburn hair and a kind of calm confidence that made people straighten their posture when she entered a room. She placed 1 bottle beside me and said I was overthinking the foundation. Her voice was soft but certain. She pulled up a chair and for 20 minutes she explained exactly where I went wrong. It was simple once she showed me. The design clicked into place like it had been waiting for her touch the entire time. I tried to thank her properly, but she brushed it off. She said she loved watching people solve problems. She said it reminded her why she fell in love with architecture in the first place. After that night, she started showing up more often at my workspace. Quick questions, small comments about my projects, little conversations that lasted longer than they needed to. One evening, she asked if I wanted to grab dinner while we finished a proposal together. We ended up at a quiet restaurant downtown talking for 4 hours. She told me about her broken engagement. Thomas had left her 7 months earlier for someone who made him feel more important. 3 years together, gone. She described it calmly, but I could hear the hurt hiding beneath her steady tone. I told her about Jessica and how she blamed me for becoming too cautious about everything in life. Claire looked at me and said maybe I just had not found the right reason to take chances yet. Those words stayed with me. We fell into a rhythm after that. Late nights. Coffee breaks that turned into long talks. She told me about her father and how heavy the company felt on her shoulders. I told her about rebuilding my life alone. We never called it anything. But it felt like something deeper than work. People started noticing. Patricia warned me to be careful about spending so much time with the vice president. Robert from compliance began appearing near Claire's department more often than necessary. Whispers floated through the office halls. That evening in the parking structure, everything shifted. We had just secured a huge contract. Claire was excited, and I could see it in the way she moved. We carried presentation boards down to her car together. The concrete walls echoed our footsteps. The air felt cool and heavy around us. After we loaded everything into her trunk, she turned to thank me. And before my brain could stop it, my mouth betrayed me. I told her that if I was older and established like her father's generation, I would steal her away tonight to celebrate properly. The second the sentence ended, I wanted to grab it out of the air and shove it back inside me. Her expression changed. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive that I had started noticing weeks ago. Then she whispered, "Then pretend I am younger." Quote, my heart stopped. Her sleeve brushed against my arm. I forgot how to breathe. For a second, the world narrowed to just the space between us. Then I saw Robert about 15 feet away, standing frozen near his car, staring at us. Claire noticed him too. Her body went stiff instantly. She told me we needed to go back upstairs. It sounded like an order, not a request. We walked to the elevator in silence. I could feel Robert's eyes on our backs the entire way. Inside the elevator, neither of us spoke. The hum of the machine climbing upward felt loud in the tight space. When the doors opened to the executive floor, The hallway was empty and quiet. She unlocked her office door and stepped inside. I followed. The city lights sparkled through the wide windows. Without the noise of the daytime staff, her office felt different. Private. Intimate. She set her bag down but did not look at me right away. Finally, she said Robert saw us, and by morning, the entire company would know she was alone with me in a dark parking structure. She said people would turn it into something it was not supposed to be. I heard myself ask, "What if it is something?" She laughed, but it sounded tired. She reminded me I was 42 and recently divorced. She said the last thing I needed was rumors that I was advancing my career through personal connections. I told her that was not what this was about. She asked me what it was then. I could not answer. Before I could find the right words, her phone buzzed loudly on the desk. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. "Thomas," she said under her breath. She answered the call and turned toward the window. I heard her tell him to stop calling her at work. Her voice sharpened like glass. She told him he did not get opinions about her life anymore. I stood there feeling like an outsider in a story I did not understand yet. When she hung up, she did not look at me. She told me to go back to my desk. I said her name softly, but she cut me off. "Marcus, just go." I left her office feeling like something fragile had just cracked between us, and I knew that whatever happened next would not be simple, safe, or quiet. The next morning, the air inside Brightwell Industries felt different. It was the same building, the same polished floors and glass walls, but something in the way people looked at me made my chest tighten. Conversations stopped a little too fast when I walked by. Robert from compliance passed my desk without speaking, but the look he gave me said more than words ever could. Claire did not come by my drafting table that day. We only spoke through email. Short, clean sentences about deadlines and revisions. No warmth, no late-night conversations. No coffee breaks that lasted too long. It was like someone had flipped a switch and erased whatever had been building between us. By the third day, I started to feel invisible again. On the fifth morning, I arrived early like I always did. It was 6:30, and the office was still quiet. I turned on the lights above my desk and set my coffee down, trying to focus on a new structural layout. That was when I felt someone standing near me. I looked up and saw Claire. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. She was not wearing her usual sharp expression. She looked human, tired. Worried, she said Thomas wanted to meet with her tomorrow. Something about mutual friends from their engagement. Her voice sounded unsure, and that alone made my stomach twist. I asked what he wanted. She shook her head and said he never asked to meet unless he wanted something from her. Later that morning, her assistant called me up to her office. When I walked in, her phone was buzzing nonstop on her desk. She stared at it for a moment before answering. I heard her say his name again, but this time her voice went ice cold. She told him it was none of his business who she spent time with at work. There was a pause, and then she said, "That's low, even for you." She hung up harder than she meant to, and the sound echoed in the quiet office. She looked at me like she was carrying something heavy. She told me that members of the board had been calling Thomas, asking questions about her, asking if she was stable, asking if her judgment had been affected by personal issues. The words felt like ice down my spine. I said they had no right to question her like that. She built her reputation here on talent and hard work. She earned her position. She said the board could do whatever they wanted if they believed appearances were bad for the company. A young vice president spending private time with an older divorced employee. It did not look good on paper. I asked her if she was making decisions based on feelings. She looked at me for a long time before she answered. "Yes," she said softly, "and that's what scares me." After that, the days blurred together. We went back to emails only. No lingering looks, no late-night talks. In meetings, she avoided my eyes completely. It hurt more than I expected. It felt like I was watching something slowly disappear. Patricia stopped me near the supply room one afternoon. She told me the partners were watching closely now. She said whatever was happening between me and Claire needed to be handled carefully. On Wednesday, David cornered me in the break room. He smirked and said he heard Claire's ex-fiancé was making noise about her relationship with a subordinate employee. He said it was going to get messy for someone soon. I did not answer him. I just walked away. But his words stayed with me. Thursday morning, I came in even earlier than usual. The office was nearly empty. I sat at my desk staring at blueprints I could not focus on. My mind kept replaying that night in the parking garage. Her whisper. The way she stepped close to me. Footsteps echoed across the quiet floor. Claire appeared wearing the same clothes from the day before. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and she looked like she had not slept at all. She sat on the edge of my drafting table without saying anything at first. Finally, she said she was tired of being afraid. She said she spent 3 years in an engagement where she made herself smaller so Thomas could feel bigger. She worked at this company to prove she did not need anyone's approval to succeed. But somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that being strong meant being alone. She reached for my hand slowly. Her fingers were cold. She said she was falling for me. The words hit me like a wave. She said it scared her more than losing the board's respect, more than Thomas trying to interfere, more than Robert writing reports. Because if she admitted this was real, then she had to admit she wanted something she promised herself she would never want again. I squeezed her hand and asked what she wanted right now. She said she wanted to stop pretending this was just work. She wanted to stop feeling ashamed every time someone looked at us. She wanted to walk into a room with me and not feel like she was doing something wrong. Her eyes looked bright, like she was holding back tears. She said if we did this for real, it would not be easy. The board would question her. My coworkers would whisper that I only succeeded because of her. Her father might believe she was risking everything for someone who would eventually leave. I told her I was not a child. I knew what I was risking too. She asked quietly if I truly understood the cost. I told her we would find out together. She did not leave that morning. We sat there as the sun rose through the office windows, talking about everything we had been too careful to say. She told me how Thomas made her feel like ambition was selfish. I told her about Jessica and how I let fear turn me into someone safe and predictable. She rested her head against my shoulder. When people began arriving around 7:30, she stood up quickly and straightened her jacket. She started walking toward the elevators, then suddenly turned back and returned to my desk. She said her father wanted to meet me this weekend. My heart started pounding hard in my chest. She said if I mattered to her, he wanted to know who I was. But she suspected he really wanted to decide if I was using her, or if she was making a mistake because she was still hurt from her broken engagement. I asked what she thought. She said she was tired of being afraid of what people thought about her choices. Saturday evening came faster than I expected. We met her father at an upscale restaurant across town where no one from the company would see us. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed and calm in a way that made me nervous. The kind of man who built an empire and did not apologize for it. We ordered food, but I could barely taste anything. He asked me direct questions about my career, my divorce, my intentions. And as he leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully, I realized this was not just a dinner. It was a test. And I had no idea yet if I was about to pass or fail. Claire's father did not waste time pretending this was a friendly dinner. He folded his hands on the table and looked straight at me. His eyes were sharp, not angry, but measuring, like he was studying a building design for weak points. He asked me how long my marriage lasted. He asked why it ended. He asked if I believed in loyalty, or if I was the kind of man who ran when things became difficult. I answered him honestly. I told him my marriage lasted 12 years. I told him I stopped fighting for it long before it officially ended. I told him I became safe instead of brave. I said I was not proud of that. He asked me what I wanted from his daughter. That question sat heavy between us. I looked at Claire for a second. She was calm on the outside, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I told him I did not want her position. I did not want power. I did not want shortcuts in my career. I said I wanted the way she makes me feel awake again. I said I wanted to stand beside her, not behind her. He did not smile. He asked if I understood that being with her meant being judged constantly. He said the board would look for any reason to question her decisions. He said my colleagues would assume every promotion I earned was because of her. He leaned forward slightly and said, "If this damages her reputation, can you live with that?" The question hit harder than I expected. I told him I would never ask her to choose between her career and me. If it ever came to that, I would step away. Claire looked at me sharply when I said that. Her father noticed. He asked if I loved her. The word love felt big in my chest. We had not said it yet. Not out loud. I said I was falling in love with her. And I was not pretending it was casual or temporary. I said I had already done the math in my head about the age difference, about what people would say. I think about it every day. And none of it changes how real this feels. He sat back and studied me quietly. After a long pause, he said he built Brightwell Industries from nothing. He said he protected it fiercely because it carried his name and his life's work. But his daughter was not a project or a building. She was not something to manage. He turned to Claire and asked her directly if she believed I was worth the risk. She did not hesitate. "Yes," she said. Her voice was steady. The dinner ended without drama. He did not give approval. He did not forbid anything. He simply said he would be watching how we handled this. When we stepped outside into the cool night air, Claire let out a breath she had been holding for 2 hours. She looked at me and asked why I said I would step away if it came down to her career or me. I told her because I would never let her lose everything she worked for because of me. She stepped closer and said softly, "That's exactly why I don't want you to step away." For the first time since the parking garage, she kissed me. It was not rushed or dramatic. It was slow and careful. Like we both understood this was the line we were crossing for real. Monday morning felt like walking into a storm. By noon, I was called into a meeting with 2 senior partners and someone from compliance. Robert sat quietly at the end of the table with a file in front of him. They did not accuse me of anything directly. They asked about my professional boundaries. They asked if I felt my work had been influenced by personal relationships. They asked if I believed it was appropriate to spend private time with a company executive. I answered calmly. I said my work speaks for itself. I said I have never received special treatment. I said I respect the company's policies. They said they were reviewing internal concerns and would be monitoring the situation closely. When I walked out of that room, my pulse was racing. Claire was called into a separate meeting that afternoon. I could see through the glass walls of the executive conference room. She sat tall, her posture straight, her expression controlled. When she came out, her face was pale but determined. She came to my desk after most people had left. She told me the board had suggested she distance herself from me professionally. They hinted that if rumors continued, they might open a formal investigation. She said Thomas had spoken to someone on the board. He told them she was unstable after the engagement. He implied she was acting impulsively. I felt anger rise inside me. She said the board asked her one direct question, whether this was worth risking the company's reputation. I asked her what she told them. She said she told them her personal life was not a weakness. It was not a scandal. And she refused to apologize for caring about someone. Hearing that made something inside me shift. But the pressure was real. By Wednesday, the whispers were louder. David made another comment in the break room about ethics. Patricia avoided looking at me completely. Claire and I tried to act normal during meetings. We spoke only about projects. We did not touch. We barely held eye contact. But the tension between us was strong. Thursday evening, she came to my apartment for the first time. She stood in my living room looking around at the simple furniture and half-unpacked boxes that had been sitting there since my divorce. She asked if this was where I had been hiding. I nodded. She walked over to the window and said she did not want to hide anymore. She turned to me and said the board was giving her 1 week to resolve the situation. Either clarify that nothing inappropriate was happening or accept that her leadership would be questioned. She asked me if I was ready for what that meant. I said yes before fear could stop me. She stepped closer and placed her hands on my chest. She said if we were going to do this, we needed to stop pretending. No secrecy, no shame, no hiding in parking garages. I told her I agreed. She looked up at me and said quietly, "Then tomorrow, we tell them." My heart pounded hard. "Tell them what?" I asked. She held my gaze. "That this is real." And in that moment, I knew there was no safe path forward anymore. Friday morning felt heavier than any day before it. I barely slept the night before. Claire stayed at my apartment, but neither of us rested. We lay awake in the dark, talking in low voices about everything that could go wrong. About the board. About her father. About what it would mean if this cost her the company she grew up in. At 7:45, we walked into Braywell Industries together. Not holding hands. Not touching. But side by side. That alone was enough to make heads turn. By 9 o'clock, she had requested a meeting with the board and senior partners. She asked me to attend. When I stepped into that conference room, I felt every eye on me. Robert sat near the end of the table again. The same file rested in front of him. Claire stood at the head of the table instead of sitting. She said she wanted to address concerns directly. She said yes, she was in a relationship with a senior architect in the company. She said it was consensual, professional, and separate from business decisions. She said she refused to pretend it did not exist, just because it made people uncomfortable. The room went quiet. One of the partners asked if she understood the risk she was creating for the company. She said she did. Another asked if she believed she could remain objective when it came to my projects or promotions. She answered calmly that she would remove herself from any decision directly involving me. She said she would follow every compliance policy required. Then they turned to me. They asked if I understood how this might look to clients, if I realized how it could damage trust. I told them I understood completely. I said I built my career on my work, not connections. I said if necessary, I would transfer departments or report to someone else entirely. I said I would never allow Claire's position to be compromised because of me. There was a long pause. Finally, one of the senior board members spoke. He said the company valued talent and integrity. He said relationships were not forbidden, but perception mattered. They would monitor the situation closely. There would be no favoritism, no blurred lines. It was not approval. But it was not a threat either. When the meeting ended, Claire and I walked out separately. The whispers did not stop. David stared openly. Patricia looked confused. But something felt different. We were not hiding anymore. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the office settled into something quieter. People watched, but they grew bored when no scandal appeared. My projects were reviewed by another executive. Claire kept her distance during formal meetings, but after hours, she came to my place without fear. Then, Thomas showed up in person. It happened late one afternoon. I was leaving the building when I saw him standing near Claire's car in the parking structure. He looked exactly like I imagined. Well-dressed. Confident in a way that felt forced. Claire stood in front of him, her arms crossed. I stayed back at first, unsure if I should interfere. I could hear raised voices echoing against the concrete. He accused her of throwing away everything they built. He said she was making reckless choices. He said she would regret ruining her reputation over a man fresh out of a failed marriage. That was when she stepped closer to him and said clearly, "You do not get to define my mistakes anymore." He saw me then, his eyes narrowed. He asked if I thought I could handle the pressure that came with her world. He said men like me did not survive in families like hers. Before I could answer, Claire did. She said, "He doesn't need to survive my world. We're building our own." Thomas left after that, shaking his head like he was certain we would fall apart on our own. That night, Claire came back to my apartment and cried for the first time since I met her. Not because she doubted us, but because she was finally letting go of the weight he placed on her for years. I held her until her breathing slowed. Months passed. The board stopped questioning her stability. My projects continued to succeed. The whispers faded into background noise. Claire's father invited us to dinner again, but this time it felt less like an interview and more like cautious acceptance. One evening, nearly 6 months after that parking garage moment, Claire and I stood on the rooftop of a new building we designed together. The city stretched out below us, lights glowing against the night sky. She leaned against the railing and asked if I ever regretted saying that reckless thing to her in the parking garage. I smiled. I told her it was the first brave thing I had said in years. She laughed softly and stepped closer. She said pretending she was younger was not necessary anymore. I asked what she meant. She looked at me and said, "You stopped hiding. That makes you younger than you think." I wrapped my arms around her and realized something simple. Jessica once told me I stopped dreaming. But standing there with Claire, looking at a skyline we helped shape, I understood that dreams are not about being safe or careful. They are about choosing something that scares you and stepping toward it anyway. I told my boss I would steal her away. Instead, she stole me out of a life where I was invisible, and I have never felt more seen.